Welcome to the Exit Ready podcast. Ryan Ray here as always. Today you're going to love the episode. Be sure to never miss what's going on with the Exit Ready Cohort Intensive by going to www.rgahub.com/exit ready. That's rgahub.com/exit ready. I'll put a link to this in the description below so you can check it out. But if you're an owner, you're not going to want to miss this. Now, let's get to the show. Patrick, it's good to have you on, man. How's it going? Looking forward to the intensive. Maybe give yourself, or give the audience at least, a quick introduction of who you are and your background, and let's hop into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here. So my name is Patrick O'Connell. I am the managing director and founder of O'Connell Advisory Group. We are a transaction advisory firm focused on financial due diligence for entrepreneurs, private equity, capital groups, and the ETA community.
Okay, so you mentioned ETA there. For people who aren't familiar with ETA, what is that, so they understand what that is?
So ETA is Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. It's a newer movement of folks who are just looking to break, those corporate chains and buy a small business.
Okay, and so when you think about small businesses, what kind of range are you talking about? Like, they're doing 350K in net, 3 million, 10 million, because the actual definition is pretty broad. So when you say that term, what do you mean?
Yeah, and it varies based on the individual. When I think of a ETA buyer, it's up until that $5 million threshold limit set by the SBA. So typically, folks who are buying businesses will use an SBA 7A loan, which has a maximum limit of $5 million.
Okay, and so your specialty, as far as the M&A process, where would you put your specialty at?
Yeah, so I sit on a typical deal team as the QoE financial due diligence provider. So I work along bankers, attorneys, loan providers, et cetera, as part of their deal team.
And what is a QV?
So QoE is a quality of earnings. It's a accounting project, effectively, which is almost like a business audit. And the goal of that is to assess the earnings of the business. So the challenge with these small businesses, private businesses specifically, are most of them are largely unverified. They're not mandated for a professional audit. They're not a public company, so they don't, they're not regulated. So the financial data that is used to buy these businesses is largely unverified. The verification of those earnings is the crux of what a QoE is.
Okay, so if I'm an owner, I go, well, man, last year I know because I see my bank statements that I made, we'll say $1 million. Why do I need you to verify that?
So as a seller, you don't, but as a buyer, you do, because you need to know as a buyer, can this business support this debt coverage I'm about to take on, or this loan
Yeah.
I'm about to take on? That's really mission critical, number one. The second is, if you think about evaluation, what is the normalized, which is a fancy word for saying, what is the more than likely expected earnings for this business on a year by year basis?
hmm
And that's calculated from the historical earnings of the business, 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah. So much of the work, it seems, when you're dealing with sellers is helping them understand the buyer's perspective. Because if you're about to risk, $1, $2, $5, $10 million, you want to verify it. You might can see your bank statements go, well, I know this is true, but they're going to risk it and they want to make sure that it's accurate. And so a QoV, now there's, as I understand the QoV world, you're the expert here, not me, on this space. There's kind of levels, right, for the amount of QV you might need or how it might work for different size companies. You mentioned public, which we're not serving that market, so we can put them to the side. But if you're listening to this, you go, okay, well, I do 3 million in revenue, or 7 million in revenue, or 30 million in revenue. Are there different levels of QV, or how does that work out? How do you think about that for company size?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on the type of business you're looking for. When I think of a QoE, it's broken into two pieces, and the which one you choose is based on the end user. So if your end user is a bank or an investor, if you're trying to raise outside investment, you're going to need a full-fledged quality of earnings report. Uh, if you say hey, I'm looking for a second set of eyes. I'm not mandated to do this. That kind of falls in that QoE light bucket. And you can almost think of it as you bringing on a trusted colleague to help you just look through the analysis without that biasy. You may have already fallen in love with the business, but unfortunately, there are certain things that may be red flags that you need to be made aware of. So it's the QoE light or that comprehensive, and it's focused on what is you, the business buyer, what do you need that for? Peace of mind or investment?
Yeah. And do you have kind of, when you're talking to an owner, um, at what point do they need to get a QoE done because the buyer is almost always going to get one done? And it's not to come against them, but it is to verify the earnings. So, like, do you have a certain revenue threshold? You say that, hey, once you're over this point, go ahead and get one because they're going to get one anyways.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I work with a lot of brokerages, investment banks, et cetera, who represent a lot of these exceptional small business owners. Once you cross the EBITDAs of 1 million and certainly 2 million, uh, you can likely leave a lot of money on the table if you don't get one conducted. And the reasons are simple. The buyer team will conduct this. So you need to have a defendable report, which basically does the same thing they're going to do. Without that, you you can be taken advantage of and really leave a lot of money on the table.
Okay, and so when you say EBITDA, in my experience, a lot of owners don't know their EBITDA. So what is that? What does that term mean, and how should they think about it practically? Because I don't tell owners to go calculate your EBITDA because we can talk about ad backs and all the stuff involved with that. But most owners, in my experience, don't even know what the EBITDA is. Not to be disparaging, they just there's no reason for them to. So when you say EBITDA, how should they think about that? Hey, quick break here. If you're an owner, do you know that most companies will never actually sell? That means that all those years that you put into building your business are for nothing. If you want to build a business that's valuable, that people will want to buy, and you can make potentially millions of dollars from, go to rjhub.com or click in the link below. That's rjhub.com or click on the link below. And now back to the episode.
EBITDA is really earnings of the business. So what does the business spit off year over year? So if you generate a monthly P&L, it's likely going to end with a line that says net income. If you add back depreciation and taxes and maybe the wages paid to yourself, that's likely what EBITDA, it's also called SDE, which is seller discretionary earnings. Those are the two buzzwords. Again, the lingo and the jargon actually doesn't matter. The point of it is it's the exercise. The exercise is when a buyer side team comes into a deal and a quality of earnings sell side report is prepared, um, when I look at this, you gain credibility. And I already know that there are certain adjustments that I may not be able to use, which if there was no report, I probably would have proposed those. Again, these are dollar for dollar savings that you as a seller can immediately gain just by doing this exercise.
Yeah, it's great because so if you said, well, I'm going to come buy a business and I'm going to get a Q of E or a Q of E light, but a Q of E probably done in this case, we'll say. Um, you're not doing that to attack the business. You're doing it to make sure that those numbers are real, right? If you're buying a car, I want to make sure it has four wheels on it. You're like, I want to make sure it has this stuff. And so the buyer's going to get this done. So the seller getting it done is going to show them what the buyer might question. Now, I'm sure Q of E professionals might disagree over, you know, what's an ad back and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you at least have a preview into where they might try to poke holes into your valuation because you've seen what a Q of E professional is going to look at already.
Yeah, and a lot of what I do with the small business owners is it's an education process. There's certain language and the line of questions that the buyer side team will ask you. If you're not familiar with the process, you either won't understand it or it's going to make you very uncomfortable. So doing it with an ally out of the gate, even if it's for a few hours before you go to market, it's going to save you a lot of headaches. It's going to save you a lot of confusion around why are they asking me this? Are they trying to, find the skeleton in the closet? A lot of buyers, they're just trying to fact find. So, why not get the answers to the test first before you do go to market?
No, yeah, I think that's right. They are looking for skeletons in the closet that could really impact the value of the company, but that's what they should do. And so, to your point, to show them, hey, this is that, this is why we did that. So, I've asked every person I've spoke to so far, so I'm asking you your opinion. If you're running a company now and you're thinking about selling, how far in advance should you start the planning process before you exit? And then the follow up would be is at what point should you get a QoE done? Should you get multiples done, like one today to see where you're at, and then maybe 3 years from now? Like when do you guys step in? Best case scenario for a seller.
Yeah, so the exit planners, they probably will, maybe some of them are on your show or the series you're conducting. They'll probably say 12 months, 24 months to get started. When you think you're going to go to market in the next month to 3 months, it makes sense to kick this process off. Um, because QoE teams on a buy and sell side, we can move very quickly through our analysis. So once you see a go to market date set, work 30, 60 days, 90 days backwards. Find someone, an accountant or a full fledged QoE firm with US CPAs involved who lead that to help you out and start this process.
Okay, so we have yourself, we have a tax attorney, we have an M&A attorney that's going to be on here. You mentioned CPAs as well. So maybe unpack for people the difference between an M&A attorney in this process, what they can and can't do as far as specialize in. I'm sure that they all kind of differ in their services. A tax attorney, what they can and can't do, and then what kind of a QoE fits in, what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, so the good news is a lot of the folks who specialize in M&A can know enough to be dangerous in really all facets. So I know enough to be dangerous in law, but I would never give legal advice because an attorney, that's their job. From a tax standpoint, we have a full-fledged tax diligence practice. So we focus, again, we're CPAs, we do tax returns, et cetera. So we can help, you know, give you guidance from an accounting standpoint and tax standpoint directly to the deal. If you think about a regular accountant and bookkeeper, uh, we are nothing like that. We are strictly, deal makers, and the reason we're deal makers is because of the amount of reps we do. We do this for a living, uh, the deal making on the buy and sell side, and through these repetitions, we become experts in the field.
Yeah, I've had clients say, "Hey, will you look at this contract?" I'm like, "Well, I can tell you what I think, but if you get sued, you're not calling me. Like, talk to your attorney. Like, I can give you my opinion, but I'm not your legal representative on this." So what are some of the biggest mistakes that hurt valuation that you see owners do that they can easily avoid?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I think about things owners will do is using keeping commingling personal and business expenses in the P&L. Look, I get it. As a small business owner, I founded two companies. We all take advantage of the tax code for vehicles, travel expenses, etc. When your business gets overloaded with non-operating business expenses and even revenues, it just makes a muddy picture of a probably a very good business. So to the extent you can limit what is being recorded as expenses and revenues that are non-operating can save a lot of headaches, and it just gives more credibility into the financials of the wonderful company you've probably built.
Do you have like an egregious case that you've seen? Like, guy, I can't believe you did this.
I mean, I've seen everything. I've seen a vacation of like $1 million, multiple family vacations, close to 30 family relatives on the payroll who were not involved with the business, like you name it. Businesses to take advantage of some of the tax codes, whether putting the legality aside, they want to reduce net income. So those are just a few top of mind.
And that's the hard part is like you want to reduce net income, but then when you go to sell, you want to maximize net income. And so it's like, well, unless you got some crazy SaaS play where, it's trading on some kind of different multiple, you know, when you go to sell, if your net income is really low, it's hard to then justify over and over and over and over and over again how this is unique and it's $1 million vacation, it's this and that. And it's like, well, what other skeletons might there be? It starts adding that doubt into the equation. So it sucks, but it's actually better to do it the best way early on so that when you go to sell, millions of dollars can come your way instead of losing that money because you can't sell, you struggle to sell, or you sell for a lot less.
Yeah, and it's such a dilemma that if I, putting myself in the shoes of the seller, you can make a case for both. Well, I could save taxes today. I'll take the quick win. I'll figure out how to maximize value later on. And depending on where you are in life and your business, that might make sense. Here's a tip for those businesses that may fall within this SBA range. So if you have a business that is enterprise value of 5 million or less, the SBA is going to look at your tax returns, and they look very negatively if they see things that if they identify creative ways to reduce your taxable income. I'll leave it at that. Um, I've seen banks walk away from businesses that are very profitable and solid because they've had too many creative tax strategies, which are really not business related. So if you're looking to go to market for that type of business, try to do clean tax returns for at least 3 to 5 years before you want to sell.
Yeah, and that was my next question is when you're doing a QoE, not one light, just a normal QoE, how far back are you going? 3, 5 years?
Typically, it's 3 years. As we think about we getting further away from the COVID timeframe, which is such a unique element in deal making, 5 years is probably justifiable. Um, it depends on really the risk level and how much of an analysis the buyer or the sponsor wants to conduct.
Yeah, I remember post COVID talking to owners and they kind of had their 2020 year, their 2021 year, and then 22 was a lot different than 20 and 21, good or bad, depending on what COVID did to them. But then 22 was a lot different. Like, well, 20 and 21 are different. Now, to your point, though, we're about to be 26. And so you are starting to see that kind of level out and businesses mature into the new environment. But then, of course, you have, the tariff stuff, which impacts some companies and some companies it didn't. And so how do you evaluate, if you're talking to an owner, obviously put COVID to the side, but like tariff news and stuff like that. How much does those changes to the economy come into this QB process?
Yeah, and there's all great questions and challenges with economic conditions that owners will ask me about. Ultimately, when you're going to market and you're doing a QV or you're working with a bank, you want to solicit prospective buyers and get excited about your business. But you also want to address the challenges with your business. It's not all painting that red rosy picture. Looks good and it's great, which for marketing materials. But if you don't uh, acknowledge some of the challenges of your business, a buyer is going to find those in the financials. So just getting ahead of it, and if you had tariff issues or tariff challenges, just acknowledge them, and then being able to articulate, here's what we did about it, you know, and then show the risk mitigated. Like, we've resolved the tariffs, it's no longer a threat. That gains a lot of credibility in the eyes of the buyer.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird because the M&A process is one that requires you to be really open and also really close, right? You don't want all your employees to know, maybe your vendors. You don't want them to know that you're considering an exit, but to the buyer, you have to be really open. And so it's kind of this game of I've got to disclose all this stuff to some people, and to some people, I can't tell them anything. And that becomes a very tight line to walk, and owners get nervous about it. I understand. But It's just how the game plays because you don't want your employees to think that you're belling ship and walking out the door and they're going to be left without a job. You want them to stay, and so it becomes this very tough game. And so the Q of E, as you're talking to this process, that's part of that process. Like, man, you've got to show everything here, and the more you can show it, the better, the more accurately you can, the cleaner you can, the less likely you will need to involve employees earlier than you have to, right? Because if it's a real mess and you got to get employees help for whatever reason because you did something, you might tip your hand, and you don't want to tip your hand because this might not be the buyer for you. And so it's a process of, to your point about cleaning stuff up and doing it the right way and trying to walk that line the best you can. It also plays into this confidentiality that concern I think that owners have is that the better or the cleaner things are, the easier the story is to tell.
Yeah, it's deal making is very much it's a story. It's a story about your business. It's a story of how it started, what is the culture like, and really it's to solicit bids and get buyers excited. To answer your question on confidentiality, this is something small business owners will struggle with because they have key men who are non-equity, so they don't own the business, but they have been with them. You know, some of the SMB owners I've worked with, they call them like the journeymen. Like they've had employees who've worked for them for 20 years, 25 years, and the business is 30 years old. So they look at them like family, um, but they have to keep their cards close to their chest. So it's a very stressful time for sellers and even buyers, since there's potentially multiple millions of dollars on the line. So just being open and leveraging a competent M&A team can solve a lot of headaches. The folks that struggle a lot are those who are trying to learn this and DIY a lot of this process, and it just doesn't end well. You can certainly do it if you're a buyer or a seller, but there's a reason why successful private equity groups, they leverage the best and brightest because they focus on their strengths and they hire people around them for other strengths.
Well, and I had a conversation with a PE group one time, and we're trying to do some buy side work for them, and they said actually we don't like going to owners directly because those are usually not as well set up to exit. Like it's a bigger pain in the butt to go through this process with them, and so it sounds counterintuitive. You might think I want to deal directly with PE, but sometimes PE will pay you more because they know that they're getting a better deal, which is weird, but that's how this game works.
It does, yeah. And there's depending on the buyer, if it's a self-funded searcher, if it's a independent sponsor, or a traditional middle market equity group, they will have certain buy boxes which are typically very different. They run different processes. They structure deals differently. Again, it's pointing back to like who are your deal makers, who's on your deal team, and what kind of experiences have they encountered, for better or for worse. All of it is leverage and knowledge you can use for your deal.
No, exactly. Okay, so if you're a seller, you're listening to this, you go, okay, why should I come hear Patrick talk at this Exit Ready Intensive on, I think you're on the 27th we have you set for, right? Is that right? Or the third, was it 27th? I think we have, yeah. Okay, so what are they going to learn from you on that day?
Yeah, so for sellers, if you're looking to sell your business and basically maximize your value, you're going to learn when to go to market, what a Q of E looks like, and really from a dollars and cents standpoint, why you should pay someone to do it. We're going to break down ROIs of a QoE, the process, questions, how to strategically align yourself, and then what to expect from prospective buyers when this process kicks off. And ultimately, the goal is to maximize value, reduce headaches during this stressful time. So, really excited about it.
I am too, and I think that there's so much advice for buyers, and I don't like playing the us versus them game because this is a negotiation. But the advice for buyers is how to find the best deal, and the best deal is a good deal, but also to get the value where you want it at, right? So if you're a seller, you got to understand how to make sure that you're positioning yourself the same way. And there's a ton of stuff out there for buyers on like how to do this, how to do this, the ETA space, as you mentioned. If you're a seller and you're not familiar with how to be ready for those questions and present your business, then you're going to attract a lower tier seller, which is going to hurt the valuation and potentially leave, as you said, millions of dollars on the table. And you don't want to do that. Like, why would you want to do that? Because as Josh Lowenthal mentioned, you're probably going to do this once. We see these serial entrepreneurs who sell 6, 7 businesses. Okay, that's probably not you. But then, if it is going to be you, you got to wait 5 years with a non-compete. So 5 years is a long time. So if you think you're going to do it again, you're on the hook for 5 years, more than likely, just sitting on the sideline, waiting for your chance. And a lot can happen, as we've learned, in 5 years. And so it's a thing to where you really have to get this value right, because you're probably going to get one shot at it, and you want to do it the best you can. And so, anyways, I'm looking forward to it. QoE is an area that I am nowhere near an expert at. I've seen the stuff, obviously, but it's not my area of expertise. And so, the ad backs and the debates over stuff and what counts, what doesn't count. I always love the meme, the EBITDA versus the adjusted EBITDA and stuff like that. And so there's a lot to learn in this space in general from the seller perspective and the buyer perspective as well, for the M&A world. So I'm looking forward to hearing you on the 27th.
I can't wait.
Well, okay, where can people find you at if they want to connect before then?
Yeah, so I'd love to connect and learn more about you before we get on. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, it's just Patrick O'Connell. And then on X, my handle is SMB Deal Guy. Those are two great resources. You can also reach out to me via my firm's website, o'connelladvisorgroup.com. Again, I love working with entrepreneurs as an entrepreneur and two-time business owner. So if you're a seller or buyer and want to say hi, I'd love to meet with you.
Awesome. Well, Patrick, it's been great. Looking forward to this, and looking forward to learning on the 27th, because I've got a lot of notes and questions. I won't be asking questions because that's for the audience, but I've got a lot of notes I'll be taking on this as well. So looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure.